that you may qualify for. And if you don't, there are all alternatives to that. But let's not talk about those right now. Let's talk about how we can help you today. Who do you think is going to let me in the door? Because I didn't say anything about taking away their house. Didn't say anything about me. Didn't say anything about short sales. Didn't say anything about real estate. I said I'm here to help you, to provide you alternative options if you qualify to stay in your home. Now, we all know that the high majority of those individuals, there's nothing we can do for them. But you have to show them that you've done everything as their strategic partner to keep them in the home. Not there to take them out of the home. Because if you can show them that you've done everything you can to help them stay there, and at the end of the day, there's really not a whole lot you can do, they're going to say, well, you know, I know you did your best for us. What's next? What's next is that we do a short sale. Oh, we do a short sale leaseback. How many of you remember the short sale leaseback? Raise your hand. You know, I talked about that yesterday at the White House. Okay? Wow. There's programs already that we do in California through nonprofits, directly 11 or through to the HAPA program. Very limited, but it's there. Okay? One of our marketing campaigns promotes that. It's not a sales pitch. It's just saying, hey, you may or may not qualify, but here it is. We'll do the due diligence on it. There's no guarantees, but it's an option. HUD came out yesterday and said it. Short sale leaseback programs, foreclosure, REO to lease, rental back programs. They're looking for all different alternatives because they know the market is changing. You're talking about the investors buying all this inventory. Think about it, all this inventory. We're not touching that inventory because how many of us really have that many clients that can buy the cash and close in 10 days? The banks do it because of holding time, carrying time, and preservation costs. That's why they do it. They say, why would I sell the property and give it to an agent 4 months, give or take, from the time you get it to the time you close it, when I can sell it in bulk, get it off my books in 30 days. And you're not talking about a couple $100,000, you're not talking about a couple million, you're talking about hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars from the hedge funds. Taking all that inventory off the books. Think about that. Think about that. Under Freddie, again, 90 days before foreclosure, if they deny you, you can appeal it by independent servicer. You can appeal it now. Why? Because that's part of the due diligence. How many of you knew that? How many of you knew that now calling up your bank and asking, is there already a delegated plan for this type of loan under this type of investor? How many of you doing that? How many of you are using third-party negotiation companies to help you mitigate your files? 25 to 30% of short sales today go to foreclosure, not because of the seller, not because of the bank, because of the agent's inability to mitigate the file, especially when it comes to technology, especially when it comes to channels, ResNet, and Equator. If you guys can see what we see, because we have access to see the back end of these systems, how many agents out there are always in the red? You know what I mean by the red? So those of you that are using technology, you know what the red is. How many of you are out there trying to get short sales from like Wells Fargo's, Chase, BFA? Okay, do you know they look at those? Yeah. Do you know that you're rated? So they'll go back and they'll look at your history, and they're gonna go, wow, that lady likes to wear red. There's no light. And the biggest problem is right now, for those of you, how many of you are using Equator right now? Okay, is it backed up? Is it taking long to get that stuff done?
Yes, yes.
Red, you have green, yellow, and red. See, as REO brokers, for those of you that are REO brokers here, everything we did with REOs, it was task oriented. We got our emails and we had tasks. So it told us, we need this, we need this, we need this on timelines. Well, when you do short sales now, it's not about faxing or emailing anymore. It's all about going into these technologies now. The problem you have is as REO brokers, we had to pay and get training to utilize all these systems. And if you didn't, you're booted out. As a short sale professional, when you get a short sale, the majority of short sales you get out there, you gotta initiate them with usually either channels, ResNet, or Equator. Usually Equator the biggest one. Well, what happens is that when you initiate, you put certain documentation, okay, and then you got timelines. So it could be 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, whatever the case, depending on the negotiated timelines they give you. So when you don't meet a certain timeline, you go green. When you don't meet the second timeline, you go yellow. When you don't meet the third timeline, you go red. The fourth timeline, they just kick you out. You got to start all over again. And then you're rated. You're rated. So when you go in and you try to get short sale referrals from companies, they go and they look at your score. And depending on how many reds you had, then basically you're either going to say, well, this is a great agent, or this is not. I'll tell you this. The best agents out there that are always in the green are the individuals who use the third-party negotiation companies, because that's all they do. Did any of you in your shorts, when you got your license as realtors, did any of you ever take a negotiation certification class? Because there's none out there. We're not negotiators. That's not what we do. On the average right now, it takes about 40 to 45 hours to negotiate one file. And the average is about 4 to 5 months. Would you not agree with me on that?
Yes.
Okay. What is your name, man?
Letty?
Letty. Would you agree it's 40, 45 hours for one file, about 4 or 5 months, give or take?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you this, Letty. If you had a company that came in and said, I'll do this for free for you, and now you could use other than maybe 2 or 3 hours of your time for certain documentation gathering, what have you, could you do more with 40 hours than sit there behind the desk and maybe do it wrong? Because when we're in a hurry, we're always doing it wrong.
Exactly.
The third-party companies, right now, the agents that are using third-party negotiation companies are the agents that are getting referrals. Because there's no reds. There's very, very few yellows. Now, sometimes you're going to get some yellows because a client didn't give you the paperwork in time. It is what it is. It is what it is. But it's your job to be on them. Now, if it's a client situation, then, there's only so much we can do. But if it's your situation, then you deserve it. There's companies out there right now that are already going after agents and following sellers that were foreclosed on. And it's happening in California. I don't know about the rest of the country, but it's happening in California right now. There's attorneys sending out letters, sending out emails to homeowners that have been foreclosed on, and said, were you in a short sale listing agreement when your property went in foreclosure? If you were, you may be awarded monetary damages for your agent's inability to service your short sales effectively. That's the next big phase coming. So all the attorneys that were all suing for the modifications, now they're going to go after the agents. Because why? You got E&O insurance. You got E&O. And even if you're not guilty, you still got your deductible. And even if you're not guilty, they'll settle because they don't want the bad PR.
So Fabian, I know that this presentation usually takes 5 hours, and we're short on time. But I think what I want to do, because I lost control of a panel of one. I think I lost control when I gave up the podium.
Your friend over there is laughing about the dog, and I'm very offended about that, the whole dog joke.
So with that, I know there's a lot to cover, but so let's open it up for questions.
Okay.
And you can take questions,
sure, please.
Because I know they may have some very specific situations that they're dealing with, or maybe
we've heard that time and time again. That's the easy part. Understanding it and implementing it, in my opinion, is the hard part. How do I use it when I walk out of here? Like today the discussion, we walked out of there, everybody walked out saying, okay, now what do we do? When we do our trainings, we never want anybody to walk out saying, now what? We want individuals to walk out of this class and say, that's the way it's done, or that makes sense, or, you know what, I may try that. Does that make sense to you all?
Yes.
So, question, yes ma'am.
Yeah, in terms of third-party negotiators, we kind of heard rumors that the lenders are going to stop paying the third-party negotiators.
Okay.
What are?
I'm going to have to differ on that. We're starting to see more servicers and more lenders because of the different legislation coming through and the amount of short sales that are coming through. For example, and I use Equator because we all do. Equator's backed up right now. And the reason being is that individuals, when they're inputting their documentation, you're only supposed to input it in task field if it's a task. Many of the requests from the negotiator goes from the library. They're putting everything through task. It's never going, and remember, Equator only sees what's in task. The negotiator sees what's in the library. So you're getting emails saying, where's the documentation? Where's the documentation? Saying, I've done it 4 times. How many of you got that?
Yeah.
It's because you're not putting it in the right field. And now if you look at the storage percentages, you're in red because you keep putting the same files in. So we're seeing more and more banks open to allowing certain payment for mitigation companies because they're more efficient. They can do what you are not able to do, don't know how to do, or don't have the capacity to do it. So we're seeing that being more and more accepted in today's market now. A year from now, 2 years from now, who knows? Can only tell you what's going on. What I can say And this market, in my opinion, is not going anywhere for the next 18 to 20 months. Because everybody's trying to figure out the legislation right now. The legislation is paying an impact. The banks don't want to foreclose. The sellers say, if I can modify it, why short sale? The agents are trying to figure out how many houses do I got to show this one buyer before somebody accepts my offer after 20 offers because all these cash investors are buying them. Nobody knows. Any other questions?
Not a question, but I think maybe important for us to, if we're not using it as some type of a comparative chart, you were saying when you go on your listing appointments, to show the homeowners how it will benefit them. Maybe that is not a good business decision to take the modification that makes you go back from a 10-year loan you had left down to a 30-year loan and a property that's not even worth what they're going to give you the model on, even with a principal reduction. And what I was told today by an agent here from New Jersey was that they've been sending out letters offering homeowners a deed in lieu.
Yep.
Instead of a short sale, the
Yep.
deed in lieu, and giving them $20,000, $30,000.
Okay.
That's the letter now.
Okay, well, the deed in lieu, Freddie Mac came out with an aggressive campaign March 1st. So you're going to see a lot of that now.
Okay.
Problem is, if you got second stirs or liens, it's not going to happen. Okay, it's not going to happen. So that's going to be for a very specific target market. Okay, so as far as to answer your question, it's very, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm conveying to you today isn't rocket science. It's simple logic. And what I mean by logic, compared to what their original payment is, what it would be through a modification, what it would be if they were buying a new home, and what would it be if they're renting. And then you subtract. Then you subtract from the last part to the current payment, and you see the difference on a 36, 5-year, 30-year. And after doing a mortgage payment or a rental, the average consumer will save 8.5% even after making his payments via rental or mortgage, new mortgage, not modified mortgage,
Right.
new mortgage. Because let's say you have a $500,000 home, 50% principal reduction brings it down to $425. Current market value is $275. You purchase that property now $275 with 3.5% down at 4%. Or if you can't purchase right now, then you go rent a home. So the new purchase is, let's say, $1,900 payment. The rent is $1,400 payment, but your current monthly original payment is $4,000. So go from $4,000 to $1,400, less miscellaneous. Okay, divide that, and that's what. Let's say $2,000. Just hypothetical. $2,000 times 36. Okay, that's $72,000 if I'm doing my math right. Okay, $72,000 they just saved from their original payment to a rental payment. Now, do you think that 3 years, $72,000? There's no FHA, there's no 5%. Now they can qualify to buy something at 10%, 5%, and have reserves. Simple mathematics. How many of you are doing that? How many of you are getting in front of that client and say, look at what you're losing every single payment, and it's non-performing, and it's all interest, and you still got a $150,000 balloon payment on the back. You'll never pay it off.
That's right.
So with that, how many think you can get in front of a client today
Yeah.
and say, let me show you the numbers? Because numbers don't lie. Your sales pitch may lie, okay?
That's right.
But the numbers don't lie. And that's where you've got it, where you contradict the fear, the emotion, and the lack of information. Because now you just say, here it is. 2 plus 2 is 4, regardless how you dice and slice it. And that's what the consumers want to see. I do community outreaches quite a bit. And you know what, time and time again, the sellers tell me after I do my presentation, where were you a year ago before they foreclosed on me? Where were you after $10,000 I just paid that attorney that hasn't done jack diddly for me? Why ain't the nonprofits? Why isn't the bank? Why isn't my attorney saying what you're saying? I said, because that's not their job. Yes?
Fabian, in your experience right now, how many lenders are doing short sales with no lates? Because as you know, for what you're saying is for a borrower to be behind.
I'm not saying that.
No, I'm saying, the comparison said is, if they let go of the property and then current value, buy with 5 or 10 with today's interest rate, the only way they can do that is an FHA with no late. As long as you're not late, you can buy an FHA immediately concurrently. What is your take right now? Because I've seen several and I've done several, but not all the banks are participating. So what are they doing now for Fannie Freddie?
If it's a Freddie Mac loan, you can do without being behind. You just have to show eminent possibilities of going into foreclosure. You're going to see a lot of the banks. You got to remember, the banks' mentality, philosophies, ideologies are changing now. Okay? How many of you are calling the banks, your servicers, your lenders, and saying, many of that information is really over our head because it's on the Wall Street, it's on the governmental area where they understand the language. And one of the things that we've been doing for the last year is trying to create a program, a presentation, if you will, a PowerPoint, to explain it in layman's terms. How does this legislation affect you and I as practitioners in our everyday work environment? How can I use that to prepare myself today and prepare myself tomorrow to the best of my ability to become more efficient, to be more informed, and ultimately to create more listings and more sales. And my ultimate goal is creating community stabilization and helping the marketplace get back at its feet. Because a lot of this legislation is built on that. But realistically, after we heard all of this, at the end of the day, we're still like, you know, what does it really mean? You know, it sounds good, and I'm sure the intentions are good, but what does it really mean to me and you as we get back to the office and say, okay, how does the CFPB affect me today? What can I take back to my office as an independent and utilize it in my next listing presentation? Or how do I go back as a broker owner and train my agents? Would you not agree? How many of you are agents? Raise your hands. Okay, so you got about half the room that are agents. How many of you doing short sales? Raise your hands. Okay, how many of you are lenders? Raise your hands. Okay, so you got about half and half here. So each and every one of us as practitioners, even if you're a title or escrow, appraisals, home warranty, we're all affected directly and indirectly of what's going on in the marketplace. One of the things that you're going to start seeing with a lot of this legislation is the market's going to shift. It is already shifting for those of you that have been practicing at least the last 5 years. How many of you a year ago were doing REOs? Raise your hand. So for the agents, you're doing it. For the lenders, how many of you were doing REO loans? Pretty much everybody was. Would you not agree? Where are the REOs today? Do you know that currently we have 5.3 million Americans in default right now, today? But where are the REOs? 80% of the REO non-performing assets are being sold via alternative disposition, meaning the hedge funds, the auctions, the REITs are all buying this inventory that you and I, as practitioners, and how we make a living, will never touch, at least not for a few years. Why? As she was mentioning, some of these servicers, they got no control over what they can do. Interesting point yesterday that was brought to my attention at the White House was that HUD is not going to sell properties through bulk. HUD, okay? Part of that agreement is that the investors that buy it, they have to hold it for 6 months. Within that 6 months, they have to do what's called due diligence. They have to try to provide a modification or a short sale before they go to foreclosure. Well, that's already here because that's part of the participation agreement, okay? The bottom line is they got nobody policing that. There's no agency out there policing them, making sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. So these investors, these small services, I'll give you an example. How many of you have ever heard of Aquin? Okay? Aquin does not participate with realtors. Everything they touch goes to bulk or auction. Any REO they touch, for the most part, it all depends on who the investor is, but for the most part, it is going on that fashion. So for those of us today, what is our biggest problem as lenders or realtors? There's no inventory. But I think that's less of our problems, ladies and gentlemen. I think where the biggest problem lies is that with this new legislation and part of the participation agreement with the 5 big lenders, part of that participation agreement was you have to create more due diligence practices. Due diligence practices are simply this: you got to offer more mods and more short sales, and you better be able to show us, if we ever audit you, show us that you made an effort, a diligent effort to go out and offer modifications, offer short sales, offer whatever, deed in lieu, whatever the case may be. And if you don't, then you're subject to lawsuits. And I'm going to go over some key points right now on the different from the Homeowner Bill of Rights. How many of you are familiar with the Homeowner Bill of Rights? Raise your hands. How many of you are from California? Raise your hand. Okay. So the Homeowner Bill of Rights, I'm going to start there if you don't mind. I'm going to go through some bullet points if you want to take some notes. And I'm going to kind of discuss them because we're a little bit pressured for time. But the Homeowner Bill of Rights was a federal mandate in March 2012. Under the Homeowner Bill of Rights, what the Homeowner Bill of Rights allowed is that every state was able to sign it into law independently. While Governor Brown in California signed it into law in July, came effective January 1st of 2013 to December 31st of 2018. 5 years. Why do you think that is? Because they know we're still in this for some time to come. The participation agreement, 5 years. Why? Because they know we're going to be in this for the next few years. Under this particular homeowner bill of rights, it's policed by the Attorney General. The Attorney General will go out and make sure that everything's being done. It's being policed. So there, at least there's somebody in the back taking a look and making sure that everybody is doing their job. Some of the key points of it, it has to be a first lien, it has to be owner occupied, it has to be 1 to 4 units, and all liens holders must participate. Now, if you're part of that, this is an interesting fact that I found out not too long ago, is that, let's say for example, and I'll use because you're here, it's a Chase first and it's a Wells second. Well, Wells and Chase are part of the participation agreement. So let's say that Chase has a first and Wells has a second of $30,000. And in the HUD, they put down that for the payoff on the second, they're going to offer $8,500. Well, because Wells is part of that participation agreement, under his portfolio, they have to accept the $8,500. They cannot counter that. Now, if it's an investor and you're servicing it, it's different. You don't have to, because that investor may not participate. But if it's portfolio, they have to. What does that mean to you? Ladies and gentlemen, our industry is changing. It's all about education and knowledge. And how do you, when you get a listing, when you get a short sale listing, what are the questions that you ask? When you call that bank and you say, are you short sale? Are you investor? Are you portfolio? Is it Freddie? Is it Fannie? And I'm going to go through all the different directives. If it's Fannie, Freddie, if it's investor, who is it? Because there's different guidelines and there's different policies that they all got to abide by. And that's very paramount to this. Under the homeowner bill of rights, you got what's called dual tracking. How many of you are familiar with dual tracking? Raise your hand. Dual tracking is basically saying, have you ever heard the saying, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing? Okay, well that's not going to happen anymore. If it's through short sale, it cannot go through modification. It has to be completely canceled out. How many of you have ever had a short sale said, I'm calling on an update? Well, but your modification status. That's not going to be the case anymore, number one. Number two, you're going to have a single point of contact. Meaning that when you call, you're either going to have a person that will always know your file, or a team of individuals that will know the file. Because how many of you have had a file 5 months, and now the negotiator has been changed, and they say, you got to start all over again. Okay? That's not happening anymore. Okay? Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen. All right. Hey, it's starting, baby. It's on.
We're gonna pass the collection plate right now.
One of the that was good. I have to say that. Anyways, submitting your package. And this is under the homeowner bill of rights, so I still got to go through, so I'm going to go pretty quick. They got to get back to you within 30 days. They don't get back to you within 30 days, they get 15-day extensions. Well, within that 15-day extension, they got to notify you every week. What is your status? If you're denied, now the consumer will have the right to what's called a redress, meaning that they can appeal why it was denied. But in your denial, you're going to get that denial letter with 30 days from the denial stating why you were denied. Be it a modification or be it a short sale. So many a times when it's for value, they're going to tell you it's value. And what you're going to start seeing more, it's called listing guidance. You're going to find now that many, and I don't want to get over stuff because that's another section, but many of these banks are already speaking to their investors, getting the guidelines as to what they'll do with this particular property, this particular note. So when you call in and say, I want to do a short sale, they're going to go ahead and already in some cases have delegated authority to know what they can do for me from day one. And they're going to direct you in that fashion. Why? As you heard the distinguished speaker saying, and you heard the panel this morning, and for those of you that went to the White House yesterday, they want to streamline the process. Now, you got the individuals next door talking about how to get short sales. Ladies and gentlemen, getting short sales is easy. It's getting the right short sales that are hard. It's knowing what short sales to take, or what deals to take, and what deals not to take. Why? Because you're going to find more and more short sales canceling. Why? Because you got the participation agreement, then you got the DOJ. How many of you are familiar with the DOJ? Department of Justice Principal Reduction Program. Right now, consumers are getting in the mail $25, $35, $50, $100,000 principal reduction right now. They're getting their seconds forgiven. They're getting full modifications, fully amortized, 30 years, no balloon payments at 3.5%, 4%. So you as a listing agent, who's a listing agent here? Raise your hand. What's your name, ma'am?
Nancy.
Nancy. So Nancy, When you get a listing, Nancy, and you're sitting there with the homeowner at the table, are you asking the million-dollar questions, Nancy? Are you saying, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, talk to me. I want to try to get a feel of who you are and what your plans are for you and your family, not only today, but for the future. Have you engaged in a modification yet, Nancy?
No.
Okay, well, you're speaking to your clients, because many of the clients haven't, okay? If you could qualify for a short sale, Nancy, would you take it? And let me show you the way the modification works. How many of you today are doing presentations to your clients and showing them how much they actually will lose when they modify and the pros and cons of a modification versus short sales? Raise your hand. In a PowerPoint presentation, number by number by number, showing rental to mod to new payment, 3 years, 5 years, 30 years. You got to remember, modifications are happening today for 3 reasons: fear, emotion, and lack of information. Has nothing to do with logic. Now, because all this new legislation is coming back and these banks have to engage in modifications, the consumers are saying, why not? I'll take it, because it's an emotional situation where they say, I want to stay in my home. My kids go to that school. My daughter was born here. My dog jumps over that gate. I'm part of the PTA. Whatever that may be, right? They don't want to leave. But see, the bottom line is, if you showed them how much money they actually spend, when I mean spend, I mean lose. At the end of 3 years, they're actually losing somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $50,000 that they're losing, that is lost completely. And we have a PowerPoint, I'm not showing it to you today, but there's a PowerPoint that we present, and it breaks it down number to number to number. 70% of my presentations when I do them, the seller says, oh, heck no. And they don't say heck no, they use another word. Because they're saying, you know what? You're the only one out there showing us the numbers. The attorneys that are charging us $5,000 to litigate, to modify, the nonprofits, I'm sorry, Sergio, but there's a flip side to that. The nonprofits don't show that because, frankly, that's not their job. They're there to counsel, and they're there to give them the numbers. Those modification companies are saying, hey, I'll keep you in the home for the next 10 years if you give me X amount of dollars every month. Their job is not to tell you the truth. Their job is to manipulate you, side the nonprofits, manipulate you to pay them to keep you in the home. And then at the 9th hour, when you finally figure out that they're lying, there's nothing they can do for you, now you run to your agents, and the agents say, I'd love to help you, but you go to foreclosure next week. Now, under the Homeowner Bill of Rights and the Department of Justice, what they're doing now is, under these directives, you're going to get more time on the front end. You're going to be getting anywhere between 4 to 6, possibly 8 months more time on the front end before the notice of default is filed. But once the notice of default has been filed or the notice of sale has been filed, the probabilities are it's going to foreclosure. It's not going to be like today where you can get extension, extension, extension. You may get one extension because you're in a short sale. You may. But if you're in a mod, it's not going to happen. You're going to go to foreclosure. It's on paper. You're going to foreclosure once that is filed. This is why you see right now less notice of defaults being recorded. You see less notice of sales being recorded because the banks have to follow this directive. Freddie Mac, they can't even, any loan that's under Freddie Mac cannot even list a notice of sale until after 121 days. After 121 days, they cannot list. 120 days, 3 months, 4-month time period, they cannot. Let me go through, I'm getting off, so I'm going to give you the bullet points if you want to take some notes. So, the one good thing now is if anyone is getting foreclosed on illegally, you now as a consumer can sue your punitive damages, $7,500 up to $50,000, where before you couldn't do that. Now you can. You can sue your lender. You can sue them in an injunction to stop the foreclosure, and then you can sue them for damages after they foreclosed. So you're going to see a lot of injunctions going on, a lot of lawsuits going on saying, you do not have the right to foreclose on me. How many of you heard of a securitization audit? Raise your hand. Securitization audit. Okay, you got one. Okay. How many of you heard of fraudulent BKs? Okay. Through systems out there, I can keep you in your home for 5 years. I can put you in so many LLC bankruptcies without your homeowner's name being there, but I can keep them there for 5 years if I want to, and there's nothing nobody can do. But even if they go to court and get a stay, the stay is on the name, it's not on the house. Then what they do is after that's done, then you go do a securitization audit, you file the injunction, and now that bank, servicer, lender, investor has to prove that they got the note and the title together to be able to foreclose on you. How many of them have it? this is why the banks are saying, let's participate. Because all of these little tricks are becoming mainstream, they're becoming on the market now.